mutant, and proud.
Welcome to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy. Marvel's Phase 4 is expanding the MCU with new genres, TV shows, new heroes, but they're still not addressing the big mutant elephant in the corner of the room. Where are the X-Men? We got, well, a Professor X in the Multiverse of Madness, and the announcement of X-Men 97, but X-Men 97 is not going to be canon, and Professor X, well... We want to see the X-Men in the MCU because, well, they're awesome, but also because these stories are very personal to so many people. The X-Men began as heroes that were just weird and different, but then they became Marvel's proxy for the 60s civil rights movement, and then they were embraced by the queer community. Queer teens read the comics' incredible character depth and related to the themes explored in those pages. The X-Men wake up every day and live in a society that is seemingly and entirely against them. And for comic book readers, especially for queer comic book readers, this helped them form an emotional connection to these characters that cannot be understated. Why is that? Well, Doug, let's take a look.
Look hard.
Okay, so being honest, it would take an entire series of videos for me to even scratch the surface on queer subtext throughout history. But to give you general context, throughout history, whenever queer people find themselves unable to live authentically, they will instead find that authenticity through characters and stories in the media. To give you a very brief explanation of this, let's go back to about the mid-20th century with the motion pictures. Due to the concern over troubling media and the need to preserve a good moral social consciousness, the Hays Code was created for film, a set of guidelines and standards, or don'ts and be carefuls.
No. No. No, 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 no.
And it wasn't great, to say the very least. Now, while the movies had the Hays Code, comics soon enough had the Comics Code Authority. Now, this was a creation loosely based on the Hays Code to respond to the growing concern of content in comic books. And that list called for banning scandalous material. It said illicit sex relations are neither to be hinted at nor portrayed. Violent love scenes as well as sexual abnormalities are unacceptable. The treatment of love romance stories shall emphasize the value of home and the sanctity of marriage. And sex perversion or any inference to same is strictly forbidden.
Ugh, as if.
And this came out in 1954, and back then, without any precedent or explanation of what this meant, the code could be used to ban any sort of queer characters or storylines from existing in comic books. So by the end of the 20th century, the code was, thankfully, phased out and ultimately defunct. Not even a decade after this began, we started to see emerging movements in the 1960s like second wave feminism, the civil rights movement, and the gay rights movement. It was a period where an entire generation called for necessary social change, where marginalized people were gradually gaining their due visibility and a platform to demand their rights be recognized. These movements influenced a new generation of comic book readers, and as such, comics had to take note. Comic book scholar Ramsey Fawaz said that the 1960s led to a reinvention of the superhero from a figure of white, masculine, nationalist power to a figure of species and social outcasts. Heroes of the 1960s were created through freak accidents or genetic mutations, so these heroes might not fit in the specific minorities of their readers, but they had come to inhabit the status of the minority because of their being outcast from traditional humanity. Sound familiar? Enter Stan Lee in 1963 with issue number 1 of the X-Men. Sure, character-wise, it's far from the fleshed out and incredibly complex characters that we see today, but Professor X and his school for his school for gifted youngsters were still a group of superheroes different from anyone else at the time, just by being who they are. In an interview with The Guardian in 2000, Lee said, instead of them just being heroes that everybody admired, what if I made other people fear and suspect and actually hate them because they were different? I love that idea.
I've always tried to do our stories so that it didn't matter if you were of the white race, the black race, the brown race, or whatever.
Now, Stan Lee didn't set out to create a comic book that addressed the changing times, but that said, the X-Men became an indirect reflection of what was going on in the world around them. These themes were originally rooted in the 60s Lee run and then later broadened by the Claremont run of the 70s through the early 90s. And these ideas cemented the X-Men as the heroes we know today. A team of individuals, each as unique as the other, who chose to come together because of both their individuality and the desire to live in a world that is equal for all. A chosen family, just like the chosen families that so many queer people find love and kindness within every single day.
Then why not stay in disguise all the time? You know? Look like everyone else.
Because we shouldn't have to.
So, despite the comics of the time adhering to a morally archaic standard, X-Men was among a growing collection of comics that gave us a window into a world we could escape into and find ourselves in, or at least begin to.
So, when did you first know you were A mutant?
Ever since issue number 1, the X-Men were connected by the shared experience of being ostracized just for being who they are, a mirror into the lives of queer teens around the world. Growing up queer means coming out, and that can lead to rejection from family and friends.
Have you tried not being a mutant?
It's not easy, and for queer teens, seeing their own superheroes go through the same thing can be eye-opening. Knowing that your heroes face the same tough decisions you do becomes a message of hope. Hope to continue on, and see that these hardships aren't faced alone. Eventually, X-Men really leaned into this thematic queer connection, as we would see more explicit references to the queer community and the problems the community has had to overcome. In the comics, the Legacy virus was a virus that at first only affected mutants. This was until the virus mutated and made it so even Homo sapiens were susceptible. Now, this was a clear metaphor to the HIV pandemic that began in the 1980s. A pandemic that at first publicly spread through gay men, though anyone can be diagnosed, and it's led to decades of discrimination and countless lives tragically lost. Also, there's issue number 9 of Generation Hope. We see a mutant discovering his powers and immediately getting bullied by his peers, leading him to take his own life. Writer Kieran Gilman was showing us a world of the hardships of being different, and wanted to address the devastating tragedy of teen suicide among LGBTQ youth. But on the brighter side, let's look at Northstar in the landmark Astonishing X-Men number 51. Northstar is the first openly gay character in Marvel Comics, and he got married to his longtime partner, Kyle Genadu. This was the first instance of a same-sex wedding in mainstream comic books. The X-Men films we've gotten so far have been widely polarizing. I mean, when they hit, they hit. And when they miss, well... X2 is considered one of the best X-Men films ever made, and not just because it holds some of the best villains and gay icons.
Holy shit.
Bobby's coming out scene is an intimate moment and an insight into the lives of mutants, showing how families aren't always supportive. In X3, the mutant cure plot lets us peer into the arguments for and against curing your queerness, with Angel almost forced to take it.
Calm down.
I can't do this.
Yes, you can.
Whereas Rogue was more than willing to.
I want to be able to touch people, Logan. A hug. A handshake. A kiss.
Now, the X-Men have been an enduring part of the Marvel Universe for decades, with hundreds of missions and an ever-rotating cast of characters ready to jump into the MCU. For queer people, they're friends and chosen family. Heroes that we can all look up to and find support in because they stand up for themselves and they stand up for each other. A group that inspires queer people to see their own queerness as a strength and a superpower. And I know, as MCU fans, we love a good story arc filled with galactic battles of epic proportions. And Wanda Maximoff, an infamous mutant outside of the MCU thanks to M-Day, has already had her share of huge cosmic battles. But thanks to the success of WandaVision, we know MCU fans love to see character complexity.
I don't need you to tell me who I am.
One of the defining strengths of the X-Men through the years was how they grappled with their own innate selves and how it meshed with the world around them. Wanda Maximoff is beloved by the queer community, and her story in WandaVision and Avengers and in Multiverse of Madness, really anything she's in, is a clear example of one way queer people can relate to mutants. Mutants can find themselves removed from the friends and family that they grew up with and loved, sometimes whether they like it or not. And despite that, it's still possible to carry on through life and make something out of the life that you've been given. Mutants show us that life is worth living because of both who we are and because of what makes you so unique.
No matter what awaits us, terrible or wondrous, the X-Men will always be there ready.
So, combining an IP with a crazy huge and dedicated fan base, intricately written characters, and the gigantic battles we know and love from the MCU, this is a no-brainer. Come on, what's taking you so long, Kevin?
Any tips on getting into the MCU there, Korg?
Have a dream, chase it, lose that dream, and at that point, check your emails.
What are you most excited about for the X-Men? Let me know in the comments below, or you can @ me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.